Welcome back to Movie Recaps. Today, I will share with you a horror movie from 1962. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. It's a clear sunny day. Mary Henry and two of her friends are driving in a car. Two men in another car stop at the traffic signal next to them. They challenge Mary's friend, who's driving, to a drag race. During the street race, the women's car falls off the bridge into the muddy river below. It sinks to the bottom. Police and rescue teams arrive at the incident site. While attempts are being made to find the car, Mary Henry, one of the three girls, miraculously emerges out of the river. People at the site ask her about the accident and what happened to the other girls, to which Mary replies that she doesn't remember. Mary Henry is an organist. She plays the grand organ at the factory. The factory owner tells Mary about a job as an organist at the church. She accepts the job offer. The church is in Utah. She takes the opportunity to shake off the tragic accident, which mostly she doesn't remember. After what had happened, Mary tries to restart her life, so she vows to never come back to her hometown. She decides to drive to Utah by herself. On her way to Utah, she sees a fiendish man in the reflection through the car window. She gets scared, but keeps driving. Mary keeps on looking at the window again and again, trying to make sure she doesn't see it again, when suddenly she sees him standing in the middle of the road. She gets scared and brakes abruptly, causing her car to run off the road and gets stuck in the mud on the lakeside. There's an abandoned pavilion beside the lake at this place. Mary manages to pull her car out after several attempts and continues to drive on the road. She stops at a gas station for fueling and asks the attendant at the station about the building structure that she saw on her way. The man tells her that it used to be a bathhouse. When the lake dried up, it was turned into a dance hall and finally into a carnival. It was completely closed after that. This had happened many years ago. The lake is called the Saltwater Lake. For accommodation, Mary rents a room at Mrs. Thomas's house. When she arrives at the rooming house, Mrs. Thomas informs Mary that there is a guy named John Linden in the other room across the hall. Mrs. Thomas herself lives at the back of the house. Mary begins unpacking her luggage. She sees the same pale-faced man in the window pane of her room. She gets scared but tries to ignore it. Soon after, Mary goes to the church to get rid of the delusions she is having and meets the minister. The minister wants to introduce Mary to the church congregation, but she refuses bluntly. Mary gives an impression as if she likes to be isolated. She is not very fond of having people around her. The minister tries to persuade her into meeting the staff, as it may become hard for her to live in complete isolation, but she changes the discussion by asking if she could start playing the organ. She practices on the organ for hours. The minister is impressed with her music and comments that she stirs the soul with her music. He offers Mary to take a break. He asks if she wants to go out for a drive beside the lake to get some fresh air, which she accepts very intriguingly. Mary feels the need to discover the abandoned carnival, but she doesn't want to go there alone. So she is very excited to go there with the minister. When they reach the carnival site, Mary wants to trespass. She tries to persuade the minister to go along with her. The minister stops her by telling her they can't go in as it is illegal. Trespassing would be breaking the law, which isn't a thing a minister should do. Mary isn't convinced and gives the minister a hint that she will go there some other time. When Mary returns to her house, Mrs. Thomas asks if she has had dinner. When Mary tells her that she hasn't, Mrs. Thomas offers to bring some sandwiches and coffee to her room. Mary goes to her room. While she's bathing, John, the other lodger, knocks and tries to open the door. Mary quickly comes out of the bath, thinking Mrs. Thomas had brought her dinner. She is not pleased to see John. John is brazen and tries to watch Mary change from her towel into her dressing gown through the door. They introduce each other. John asks Mary to join him for dinner in a nearby restaurant, but she retreats uninterested. After John leaves, Mary sees the man sitting in the hall downstairs. The man gazes up at Mary, gets up, and starts walking upstairs. Mary gets scared, rushes back to her room, and chains the door. Mrs. Thomas brings her food. Mary asks her who that man in the hall was. Mrs. Thomas denies that anyone else is present in the house other than Mr. John Linden. Mary insists that there was a man in the hall. Mrs. Thomas tries to calm her down by telling her that it must be the wind. Mary says that she did not hear him, she saw him coming upstairs. Mrs. Thomas must have passed him while coming upstairs. Mrs. Thomas gets disturbed by this strange inquiry and advises Mary to skip the coffee so she sleeps well. Mary hardly sleeps that night. The next morning, John brings coffee to Mary's room. She gladly lets him in and both of them have coffee. They have a pleasant conversation. Mary tells John how she is a church organist. John is impressed and feels embarrassed that he offered to add alcohol to her morning coffee. Mary, however, doesn't feel offended because to her, being a church organist is just a job she gets paid for. Mary feels no spiritual connection towards her job. John repeatedly makes advances to become more acquainted, but Mary refuses and doesn't want to be accompanied by him any further. That day, Mary doesn't need to go to church for practice, so she goes shopping instead. The salesgirl helps Mary choose a dress. She tries it on and discusses the needed alterations to the dress with the salesgirl. Mary goes to the fitting room to change back to her clothes. Suddenly, she feels as if everything has ripples, as if in the water. She ignores the feeling and tries to leave the dressing room. She gets frustrated when she's unable to open the door. However, it suddenly unlocks. When she tells the salesgirl that she wants the dress delivered, the salesgirl doesn't listen. Then she tries to talk to a customer that the salesgirl was being rude, but she also doesn't seem to see her. Mary tries to contact or hear several other people at the store, but realizes that no one can see her. She runs out of the store, only to learn that she can't hear anything. The world around her is completely silent, although men are digging up the road. Mary gets anxious and runs to a nearby park where suddenly she starts hearing the birds chirping. Mary is relieved that her hearing is back. She drinks water from the drinking water fountain in the park and suddenly sees the man standing over her head beside the fountain. She gets scared and tries to run away. When she bumps into Dr. Samuel, she realizes that it is just an ordinary man. Dr. Samuel is a therapist, and his office is located across the street from the park. He invites Mary to his office and hears her story. Mary tells Dr. Samuel about her recent experience at the shopping center. She felt as if she didn't exist. Dr. Samuel advises Mary that she must be having post-traumatic stress because of the lacerative accident and her imagination is playing tricks on her. Dr. Samuel tells Mary that Mary associates her allusions to the carnival site for nothing. Mary isn't convinced. She believes she's a realist and she isn't out of her mind. She tries to negate Dr. Samuel's diagnosis as much as she can. At last, she pays heed to Dr. Samuel's opinion and then announces that she will go to the carnival in order to put an end to her delusions. Mary goes to the carnival but doesn't see anything frightening. However, when she throws a pebble into the lake, we, as the audience, can see the man's deceased body in the lake water. When Mary comes back to her house, she meets John in the hall. John asks her out again. She refuses, but John insists. He pleads what made her have coffee with him in the morning. He felt as if she was a different person. Mary admits that she didn't want to be alone that morning, and for the same reason, Mary agrees for John to pick her up at the church later that night. At the church, while playing the organ, Mary goes into a trance. Mary has a vision of the man coming out of the water to get her. This time, along with the man, there's another woman who also looks similarly strange. She is also emerging out of the lake water. Then she sees many pasty-faced people, couples dancing at the carnival. In the trance, Mary shifts from the church hymn to a strange tune. She's woken up by the minister who's annoyed with the song. The minister denounces the music as profane and asks Mary to give her resignation. Mary gives no reaction to the minister as she is confused with what happened. She silently makes her way out of the church where John is waiting to pick her up for their date. He takes her to a pub. Mary refuses to drink despite several offers and doesn't participate much in the conversation either. John gets up to get some more drinks for himself when his friend asks about the new girl John had brought with him. He wants to make a move at Mary, but John stops him. John's friend uncovers the fact that John is a womanizer. At this point, John's true intentions about Mary are revealed. He wants to take Mary to bed. At this point, John starts to feel irritated by how uninterested and bored Mary seems. John wants to leave, but Mary doesn't want to be alone that night. She insists John stay with her. Mary convinces John not to leave by telling him that she doesn't want to be alone that night. John perceives her will to be accompanied differently. As revealed earlier, John is a depraved man. He gets excited and takes Mary back to the house. He accompanies Mary to her room and makes brazen advances. Mary tries to shun him, but he keeps following. Mary had supposed that she will not see the morbid figures if there is someone with her. However, as John is trying to take Mary to bed, she sees it is not John, but the man in the mirror of her bedroom. She gets startled and screams out loud. John is put off at this behavior. Mary tries to stop him, but he coldly refuses. John leaves, and Mary gets very upset at this point. Mary tries to block every door and window with furniture. Dr. Samuel comes to Mrs. Thomas's house in pursuit of Mary. Mrs. Thomas tells him how Mary was dragging the furniture all night. She finds it really weird and doesn't want to keep Mary in the house anymore. Mrs. Thomas tells Dr. Samuel she hopes Mary leaves on her own. Dr. Samuel proclaims that Mary is a strange girl. She's fighting her own demons. Ever since Dr. Samuel met Mary, he was intrigued by her behavior. He came following her because he wanted to know what is going on with Mary and wondered if she went to the carnival as she had said. Dr. Samuel wants to know how did it end at the carnival because Mary refuses to accept his help. In addition, Dr. Samuel lets Mrs. Thomas know that Mary is determined to leave this city so she doesn't need to worry. Mary packs her stuff and leaves without saying anything to Mrs. Thomas. Mrs. Thomas asks about her week's refund, but Mary keeps walking straight and reactionless. As she's driving, her car halts and makes screeching noises, so she stops by the garage. The garage attendant asks her to step out of the car so he can inspect the transmission underneath the car, but Mary wants to stay in her seat. The mechanic levers the car up with Mary sitting in the driver's seat. As he's examining the car, another car drives into the garage. The mechanic goes to attend to the other customer. While waiting for the garage attendant to come back, Mary dozes off in the car seat. She has a vision that the man is entering the garage. Mary quickly shuts the car windows and locks the doors. The man comes towards the car and unscrews the lever to lower her car. Mary runs out of the vehicle to the bus station. When she enters the bus station, Mary gets the same feeling as she got in the fitting room. Everything seems to ripple like water waves. She ignores the sensation this time, too. She scampers towards the ticket office and inquires about what time the next bus leaves. The ticketmaster doesn't respond to her query. As she's still trying to get the receptionist's attention, a man almost shoves her to get at the kiosk. Mary looks strangely at the man for his absurd behavior, but moves away. Then she looks around and realizes that she has lost her hearing again. The bus station is very busy, but she can't hear a thing. She gets upset at this. Mary only hears an announcement in the speaker that the next eastbound bus is going to leave. Frantically, Mary runs toward the bus stand and gets on the next bus she finds. When she gets on board, she sees that the bus is full of the morbid people. As soon as Mary jumps in, all of them start smiling and staring at her. Then, all of them start getting out of their seats and walk towards Mary. She runs out of the bus station. Mary tries to ask people on the road for help, but no one responds to her as if she's invisible. She tries to get into a cab, but the driver drives away as if she doesn't exist. Mary runs hysterically in the whole town. She hears cheering noises every now and then. It is as if she is being welcomed with a round of applause. Finally, she reaches the same park that she went when she had such an episode last time. This time again, she hears the birds chirping. She's a bit relieved that it is over. Then she goes to Dr. Samuel's office across the street. She asks him for help. Mary lets out her delusions. She tells Dr. Samuel that he is the only ray of hope for her now. Otherwise, these visions will drive her crazy. While she's telling him what happened to her, she pauses, trying to catch her breath. Dr. Samuel's chair turns around, and the man is sitting in it. He gets up and tries to catch Mary. Mary screams loudly and suddenly wakes up. She had gone to sleep while sitting in the driver's seat of the car. By now, the mechanic has dealt with her car, and it is on the ground. Mary promptly drives off out of the garage, leaving the garage attendant confused. She drives to the carnival once again. Mary gets out of the car and takes a walk through the pavilion. Mary gazes at the water standing on the balcony by the lake. When suddenly she sees all the pasty-faced people emerging from the lake. She gets frightened and runs away. Then she sees them dancing in the carnival. Music plays and they are dancing in couples. Petrified by the sight, Mary just stands there watching them. Out of fear, she is frozen and just keeps watching. To her shock, Mary sees her morbid self dancing with the man. Mary is terrified when she recognizes herself and screams loudly. All the morbid people become attentive towards her. They all start coming towards Mary. Mary's terrified and runs as fast as she can. All the ghouls follow her. She runs out of the pavilion, but the morbids are still following her. There are too many of them, and everyone is trying to get her. She tries to hide, but they are everywhere. There is no place to hide. When Mary manages to escape the ruined pavilion, she stumbles and falls on the shore by the lake, and all of the ghouls reach her. All of them lean over Mary, trying to get her, and she shrieks out of fright. The next day, perhaps looking for Mary, the minister comes to the ruins beside the lake with a police officer. The police officer briefs the minister that Mary's car has been parked outside the carnival. There are her footprints leading from the pavilion to the shore. There also is a handprint on the shore, but nothing after that. They can't find Mary anywhere around. There are no further clues. On the other hand, the car that fell off the bridge in the beginning is found. There are 3 women in the car. Mary is among them. She is also dead, with her dead friends in the car.